Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Spider Slam. Is it growing on you yet? I don't know. I don't know if it is or not. Maybe it sucks still, but I just feel weird about it. I feel weird, like maybe it's not all that great. I don't know. It seemed clever at the time, and that's probably how many things in my life work. Well, it seemed clever at the time. But welcome. I'm reviewing another episode of WWE Wrestling Television. This was the WWE Raw from April 15th of 2024. And this was in Montreal, Quebec. For those who don't know, that's in Canada. Some people aren't familiar with Canada. Um, and it starts off with Rhea Ripley. She comes down to the ring for a promo. Now, her arm is in a sling and she does not look happy. If you remember last episode of Raw, the week before, she was attacked backstage by Liv Morgan. And I'm going to cover both the storyline for this and the actual factual because there's some details to this. Okay. But she goes down to the ring. Raw general manager Adam Pearce, he's already in the ring. So you know something official is going to be said. She talks about the attack from Liv Morgan. She's mad. She's upset about it. And she explains that she has to vacate the title because she's going to be out for injury for a substantial amount of time. And she cuts this angry promo about it, and it's pretty good. It's typical from Rhea Ripley. Liv Morgan heads down to the ring during this. And what's funny is there's 6 security team members like walking ahead of her, like, no, don't go down there, trying to keep her from going back. And it's like, if they really didn't want her to go down there, this is 6 big, relatively burly dudes. They could stop her from going down there, but they didn't. They're still like, oh no, don't go down there. Oh my gosh, let's talk about it. But the team splits into 2 on the ramp so that a few guys can go and block Rhea Ripley, and a few can block Liv Morgan. And Adam Pearce tells her to go, and Ripley's like, "Come on, no, let her go. I want to fight her," even with her arm in a sling. And they managed to get Liv back to the back, but Rhea's so angry she headbutts one of the security guys. Sucks to be that guy. It's pretty funny. Now the thing about this, from a storyline perspective, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea because she's a really popular champion. Like, people are really all in for Rhea Ripley, and that's not a dig at any other wrestling companies that use the term all in. I know that's something that one of the other folks used for their pay-per-views. I'm not using that as like a veiled insult or a dig. So in case anybody's like, oh, he's talking in riddles now. No. She's really super popular. Everybody's into it, right? But apparently with the attack, even though it was all staged and is a scripted event, she actually did get injured. Apparently she messed up her AC joint in her shoulder, and I guess they said it was a freak accident. It's nobody's fault, and like nobody blames Liv Morgan for it because it was just, she was doing what she was supposed to do for the attack and whatnot. It was where Ripley hit a wall at some point, and she hit it just right that it just caused some damage. So it's a legitimate injury, which is why they have to have her vacate, because she's going to be off. The estimates, from what I've been reading, for that type of injury are about 3 months, which is quite a substantial amount of time with how like rapid fire WWE is doing storylines and things right now. So I get it. I don't really care for it, but I get it. And if she's gonna go out, you might as well own up to an injury and own up for it. That's my my oven. I was preheating my oven in here. I'm in the kitchen again. I'm gonna put something in the oven here. There we go. I'm always doing dinner during these. This seems like a good part, good thing to do. So she's gonna be out, and they're gonna have to do some matches probably to see who picks up her title. There's a commercial break, that kind of thing, and then they do a backstage promo. She's down back there with the rest of the Judgment Day, and Damian Priest gives her like a pep talk. He's like, "Hey, I know you can do this. You can get through this. You're gonna come back. You're gonna get your title back. You just focus on you and getting better." And so there's that. Then the first match is the return of Sheamus. Sheamus, the Celtic Warrior. He's been off on injury himself, and he's back. So he's been out with injury since August of 2023, which is a substantial amount of time. I don't know the details of the injury. I was never a big Sheamus fan. At the time, I wasn't really watching very regularly. So I don't have details about that. But he's back. This is his first night back. And it's against Ivar, the Viking Warrior. As some of you may know, this cat's going to scream at me. Some of you may know that the other Viking Warrior is out with an injury. So Ivar's been on his own. And he's been doing pretty good. I guess he's been getting a pretty solid push. But so this is Sheamus versus Ivar. It's slow paced. And it's a decent back and forth. They get some good moves back and forth. The selling is good. Sheamus looks a little winded earlier on. Like, he looks like he's running out of steam, like, pretty quick. And when he came back to the ring, he was bigger, but he wasn't bigger in a big, bulky kind of way, like with big muscles, like he's been hitting the gym. He was bigger kind of in a slightly doughy sort of way. I don't want to insult him. I don't want to be like he's not in shape, but you know, it didn't look like he was at his peak, right? So he's getting winded. And Ivar is a big guy though. Like, trying to do those big moves on him, he's a hefty man. So a lot of those factors may come into play. But it wasn't a bad match. He gives Ivar a white noise from the top rope, which was pretty darn impressive. Because again, Ivar's not a slouch. He's not a small fellow. And Ivar does a pretty impressive splash from the top rope, something that he's been doing a lot lately. And they do some punches back and forth, and the punches are kind of weak looking between the both of them. And eventually, Sheamus does the brogue kick on Ivar for the win. So not a terrible match. I mean, not like, I wasn't hugely impressed by it, but it wasn't. I didn't feel kind of grouchy watching it. I think Sheamus needs some time. I'm sure he's been hitting the gym, and I'm sure he's been doing training, but I think he could use a little bit more of breaking back in. And I think it was smart of them to have Ivar as the first match, because that's a slower paced match, because they're both bigger guys, and it gives Sheamus some time to warm up. So I'll be looking forward to see how far along he goes with all this. So then it goes to a video recap of Sami Zayn and Chad Gable, about how Chad Gable trained him up for his match against Gunther. And so because Sami Zayn didn't think he'd be able to do it, and he needed the extra training, and he needed the extra morale boost, and Chad Gable helped him out. So they do that, because that's prepping for their match later tonight. Okay, we're not going to talk about that yet, because that's getting ahead of ourselves. After that, Triple H comes down to the ring, and you've got a table with something covered up on the table under a sheet. Okay, Adam Pearce is there. Adam Pearce talks about the tag team divisions, how they're really strong right now, and things like that. So he and Triple H call out Awesome Truth, which is Miz and R-Truth, the new tag team that won the Raw Tag Team Championship belts at WrestleMania. As they're coming down, you get the "You Deserve It" chants, because that's a running theme. There's a lot of comedy from R-Truth about all this. He mistakes Triple H for Tommaso Ciampa and a bunch of stuff, and he calls Triple H a Houdini and a magician. But the long and short of it is that they, under the sheet, there's two brand new World Tag Team Champion belts, totally different from the existing ones. New design, real shiny. They've got a new name. They're not the Raw Tag Team Champions. They're the World Tag Team Champions. After Triple H switches the belts, he leaves, and then he announces that there's going to be a tag triple threat match for the number one contenders. And Miz and R-Truth go and sit by the ring to watch, which is fair. So that brings us to the second match, which is the triple threat. And it's DIY, which has Tommaso Ciampa and Gargano, Johnny Gargano, versus the New Day versus the Creed brothers. Now, I haven't seen the Creed brothers actually do anything. I've heard that they're pretty solid, but I heard they're kind of bland looking, but that they're really solid in their work. And they had a decent showing. They were pretty impressive. The teams all collectively had a lot of synchronized moves, a lot of good double teams, a lot of good back and forth. I wrote in my notes that no one team gets the upper hand for very long. And if I'm remembering correctly, that's how it went. It was a lot of momentum shifting back and forth throughout the match. Eventually, DIY, which is Ciampa and Gargano, they get the win. So they're the number one contenders. So they're going to be going on to Backlash, which is in France. That's the next pay-per-view for the chance at the title with Awesome Truth. Then we go backstage, and technically it's a Drew McIntyre interview. He's watching something on a TV, and he's laughing and whatever. I think he's watching the footage from WrestleMania where CM Punk did his thing. And the interview's like, what are you thinking? Are you mad? Are you whatever? And he laughs about it. He seems like in his good mood, and then he kicks the TV over and smashes it, gets this mad look on his face, and then he leaves. And that's it. That's the segment. So obviously a lot going on between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. Then we moved on to the third match. It's kind of trucking. There's a lot of matches. There were a lot of matches for Raw. I know Raw is usually the longer show, but generally they have a lot of spots and segments and not as many matches in the 3-hour time slot. And now there were a ton of matches. So it's a women's tag team match. Indy Hartwell and Candice LeRae versus Ivy Nile and Maxine Dupree. And if you remember last Raw, Indy Hartwell was against Roxanne Perez, and Candice LeRae kind of tried to interfere and ended up costing you the match. Now this time, there's some good ring work from Ivy and Dupree, and I've heard recently, not too long ago, Maxine Dupree got booed out of a house show for being not entertaining, I guess. And her ring work, I think, was pretty solid in this. Some of it seemed a little bit overcalculated, but not bad. Not like the matches from SmackDown with Naomi and things like that. Not to that level. They weren't bad. I thought it was all right. Eventually, it comes down to a cheap win from Indy and Candice because Indy Hartwell cheats with some interference from Candice LeRae. And it's looking like she's more pleased with their team up this time than at the time, which shows that she's shifting to a more cheaty, underhanded kind of character. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on that, I suppose. But it was a decent match for what it was. Then you have a video recap of Damian Priest and his journey with the Money in the Bank briefcase up to WrestleMania, followed immediately by a Judgment Day backstage promo with everybody but Rhea Ripley. Damian Priest gives a pep talk to Dominic Mysterio to go out and go do your thing. You got to go do something because he's going to face Andrade in the next match. So he's like, you got to go do your thing out there. And him and JD go out there. And Finn Balor starts talking about, this thing about not having the tag belts. We got to get those back. Blah, blah, blah. And Damian gives him a harsh kind of like, you need to buck up. You need to suck it up, man. And there's a little bit of tension there. Finn Balor gives him kind of like, all right, yeah, okay, all right, sure. Whatever you say. but you can tell there's a tone in there. They're working up to the end of the Judgment Day. They're working up to it, I think. So, moving on to the fourth match. Like I said, we're just boom, boom, boom right along this time. It's Andrade versus Dominic. Well, Andrade is coming out. I think he's coming out first. Chad Gable has a backstage interview while they're doing that about how he's, looking forward to his match with Sami Zayn. So once it cuts back to the ring, Dominic comes out and they have their match. Decent form from Andrade. Decent. JD, of course, JD McDonough. I don't know how I say it. I'm bad with accents. I'm terrible with accents and how to do names and things like that. But he interferes a few times. Dominic actually pulls off a really, really clean Canadian Destroyer on the apron on Andrade. And the Canadian Destroyer is one of those moves that people are like, I think it's going to be outlawed in another year or two if people keep using it because it's too easy to screw up. But it looked fantastic. It was well done. Very well done. Very damaging. They go back and forth, and eventually Andrade hits Dominic with his move, which is called the Message, and he wins. JD comes out and attacks him afterwards. And Ricochet, who's on the team with Rey Mysterio and those guys in the Latino World Order, he comes out for the save to help Andrade. And Pat McAfee, I believe, he's the one who said this. He said, nobody likes the Judgment Day. And he's kind of right. Nobody really likes them. They like individuals. Like Damian Priest gets some buzz because of his story and managing to win the title. And Rhea is, of course, she's totally on fire. She's, even with her having to vacate the belt, I think it's going to be difficult to cool down Rhea Ripley. When she comes back, it's going to be fire. They recap what happened with the Bloodline on SmackDown. They have a minor interview with Jey Uso backstage, and the lady asks him, hey, how do you feel about your brother, And he's like, hey, you know what? He made his choice, but I can't think about that right now. I've got a match coming up. And after that, there's a fifth match. Normally, fifth match would be the headliner, but there's still a couple more after this, okay? And it's Chelsea Green and Piper Niven again, coming back to prove that they've still got their stuff. And this time they're against Caden Carter and Katana Chance, who've been a pretty solid ladies tag team for a while. I think they're usually on NXT, but it's been pretty good. I mentioned on SmackDown that Piper Niven was okay. I said that her moveset didn't quite mesh with her size as an athlete, and I think they could tinker with it a little bit and they could make it a little bit smoother. It was pretty much the same this time. It wasn't any worse. I don't think it was bad, but it really wasn't any more impressive either. But I think there's still room to improve there. Caden and Katana Chance had some good double teaming, according to my notes, and but eventually Chelsea and Piper get the win, which is probably well deserved considering that 2 shows in a row Chelsea got beat down by Jade Cargill. So that's good. They did another recap of Rhea Ripley having to vacate her title. Then they switched to Liv Morgan in a backstage interview, and she says that the Liv Morgan Revenge Tour is only getting started. So we'll see how that goes. That should be interesting. They followed that out with a Cody Rhodes in-ring promo. He came out. There were a lot of Cody chants. He talks about Seth Rollins being his shield, and he thanks him. He talks about The Rock, because I guess The Rock is still making posts, even though he's not in the ring doing stuff right now actively with the storyline. He's still making like Instagram posts about events, and I haven't followed along with those because I don't use the Instagram. I don't use Twitter, X, whatever. I don't, so I can't follow along with that kind of stuff. If you want to follow along, that's where some of the action is happening. But he talks about that. He also talks about how the bloodline seems to be fracturing and falling apart, which is, something we're all eagerly keeping an eye on. Then he invites out Jey Uso, and he offers to watch Jay's back against the Judgment Day, because Jay has a match against Finn Balor, because he has to go through various members of the Judgment Day to get to Damian Priest, because he's the number one contender for Damian Priest's title. And Jay says, no, I got to do this on my own. I appreciate it. And they have a whole bunch of jokes involving the word yeet back and forth. I'm not going to go over them because I don't like these kind of jokes. I think they're dumb. But if you have a good sense of humor like that, you may have enjoyed it. And it went on for quite a while. So anyway, Cody leaves, and Jey Uso's in the ring waiting for his match. They switch to backstage with Nia Jax, who hasn't been seen since Elimination Chamber, I believe. And she talks about how the ladies' title is her title, and she's going to claim it again, and everybody else better stay out of her way. I'm thinking they're going to set up something between her and Jade Cargill in the interim before Rhea comes back. That's what I think. I could be wrong. There's no overt like this is what's going to happen, but that's going to be my guess. So then we're on to the sixth match, which is, of course, the Jey Uso versus Finn Balor match. Finn Balor, when he comes in, he attacks Jey Uso from behind before the bell rings. Pretty strong showing from Balor, according to my notes. Jey was looking a bit sloppy, and he's been kind of looking sloppy lately. I don't know if maybe it's just he's had a lot of matches and he's tired, or he hasn't recovered from WrestleMania, or he's just kind of getting too confident in his spot in the company. But he was kind of sloppy. All the while, Damian Priest is in the back watching on a monitor, and they'll cut back and forth between him and the ring every so often, so you can see. And Jey gets his full range of moves with the spear, the kick, and the splash, and whatnot, and he wins. Damian Priest comes in afterwards, has a stare down with Jey Uso, which opens him up to being attacked from behind by JD and Dominic, and then Balor helps once he gets up. But Jey escapes through the crowd after defending himself, heads through the arena, the entire arena, and the camera follows him, all the way to the entrance of the arena where Sami Zayn is hanging out. Sami Zayn tells an inspirational story about how he grew up not too far away from this very arena, and this is his moment and everything like that. And him and Jey have a little celebratory moment, and then Sami Zayn heads in, following the same route through the crowd that Jey just left. And this leads to the main event, which is the seventh match, which is a lot of matches for Raw, at least to my knowledge, because it seems like they usually haven't been having quite so many matches. But it's a new company, it's a new era, we'll see how it goes. And this is the match against Chad Gable. He offered it to Chad because Chad did him a favor by training him against Gunther. This is returning the favor, giving him a shot at the title for the Intercontinental Championship. Bronson Reed confronts him, Chad Gable, before Gable heads out to the ring, and there's a little bit of a back and forth with them. But then they manage to both get out there. They're both good technical wrestlers. I've never been into Sami Zayn. I think because his character is sloppy, his work is sloppy as a result, because it has to be, right? But they did pretty good. Good technical wrestling. Chad Gable reminds me a lot, and I said this at the time, he reminds me a lot of Kurt Angle, and he uses a lot of Kurt's moves. He uses the ankle lock, he uses the Olympic slam, not the angle slam, but the Olympic slam. Sammy has a lot of showboating because Montreal is his hometown. He's got some good rope work, going off the ropes and bouncing off the ropes and things like that. A lot of good work from Sammy. Gable manages an Olympic slam onto Sammy from the top rope, which is impressive. They go back and forth trading German suplexes. One of Sammy's German suplexes against Gable looked pretty rough. He fell right on his head and neck area. Like it didn't stop the match, and then they both kept going. But man, it looks like he's gonna have a neck problem soon after. Gable got the ankle lock on Sami Zayn a couple of times, like 2 or 3 times. Sami ends up pulling out all the stops, winning the match, and he helps Gable up after the match, shakes his hand. You know, it looks like everything's cool. He goes out to greet his wife, who's at ringside, and Chad Gable comes up behind him, pulls him away, and slams him out there, tosses him back in the ring, and does an ankle lock on him around the ring post so he can't pull away or anything. So Chad Gable's clearly mad. He's flipped out. He's, you know, he obviously thought he was the better man. And this is going to set up probably a pretty intense feud between the two of them as time goes on. I don't know if I'm super into it. I mean, they're both pretty talented, but I'm not into Sami Zayn, and I'm not really into Chad Gable as a character either. I think they're, you know, he's like mini Kurt Angle, but not as good as Kurt Angle as far as charisma and things. And that's funny to say about Kurt Angle, because Kurt Angle isn't like a fountain of charismatic energy himself, but it was how he managed to pull everything together that worked for him, and who they set him up against too, because that had a lot to do with how Kurt Angle managed to maneuver, right? So that was WWE Raw for April. I'll go back up to the top of my notes here. April 15th of 2024 in Montreal, Quebec. A lot of stuff getting set up, a lot of, you know, decent wrestling for the most part. I think SmackDown, it was the superior episode a few days before, but I still have to see the SmackDown that's upcoming. And that's going to have more on the bloodline and some of the storylines that now I'm kind of really super invested in. So we're going to see how this all goes. But I'm not disappointed. It seems kind of run of the mill. Raw does. Nothing really. It's not super impressive, but it's not the complete opposite. It's just kind of like, all right. Yeah, you know, it's doing all right. I don't feel bad about it. But I don't look forward to watching Raw as much as I do SmackDown. So stay tuned in the near future for my SmackDown review. And like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment on this video. Tell me what you thought about these matches. Tell me what you think is going to be happening with the various storylines. I'd like to hear your thoughts on where you think all this stuff is headed. And do you think that I'm being overly harsh against Raw in favor of SmackDown? Because it feels like maybe I am, but I don't know. The stories and things on Raw are not grabbing my attention as much as SmackDown. That could just be subjective for me. So let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Continue on the march towards monetization. That's all I got for you. I will see you folks